And we're back on another exciting episode of of Starfleet Boy, where we have I think this is what Nick Kowalski does, right? Anyways,
Something. Anyway,
here once again by Trek on the Tube, Sean. Nice to see you, sir.
hello. Nice to see you, and hello to everyone out there listening to us.
Excellent. Today we are talking about Star Trek Discovery's 13th episode. There's two more left.
There is. This is not the season finale.
I thought it was, and it had the makings of the season finale as well, I have to say, but I'm delighted that there will be more.
Yes.
So yeah, 13th episode, and it's called What Is it What Is or What's Past is Prologue? Because I titled this What's I could change it. Okay, good. So What's Past is Prologue, which is such a great title on so many levels, which I'll have questions for you. But I think it would behoove us to do the episode summary first, and I'm so happy, Sean, that you're gonna give it a crack.
I can try. You say it as if I had never done this before. I have done it once before.
Yeah, I know. Starfleet Boy's memory is very short. Thanks for reminding me.
Aha, see? Put me on the spot there, but come on.
I sure did. Well, go ahead. Let's get it going.
Okay. Essentially, we start off with Lorca as he releases his followers and his army from the practically 2-year-long torture. And he finds Stamets because he wants to use, from what I gather, his bioweapon, which we don't really hear about again in the episode. Then what happens? You got Emperor Georgiou is searching for Lorca, and she has also got pretty much Burnham captured, and Burnham manages to run away. At this point, the USS Discovery has essentially learned about the orb and everything that it's doing to the Mycelial Network, and how it could potentially destroy all universes and all galaxies and all life across everywhere. So they had to head back. Well, they have to head to the Emperor ship. Back on the Emperor ship, fighting begins. And it's over pretty fast. Lorca manages to take control of the ship, and the Emperor goes into hiding. Burnham manages
that awesome phaser battle.
Yeah, that battle. Burnham manages to contact the Discovery. Talks. She's hiding in a Jeffries tube of some kind. A very big, massive Jeffries tube, but I mean it's a massive ship.
Well,
so
it's the Charon.
Charon. So she manages to contact Saru and tells him all about how Lorca is Mirror Lorca, and so essentially she's the only person left to save on the ship, no longer the captain, because the captain is no longer a captain really. And then she goes on to find the Emperor. And pretty much all of the plans come together at that point. She explains, or she cuts a deal with the Emperor, like, if you let us live, we'll help you fight Lorca. What is it? We need to destroy the power source, etc., etc.
Like, she's basically paying for their lives, yeah.
And then so all of those plans are kind of executed in the sense that Burnham pretends to capture Emperor Georgiou, goes to the throne room, and they kind of pretend to give Georgiou up to Lorca. At the same time, the Discovery comes in, fires photon torpedoes into the bridge, explosions begin.
Pew, pew, pew.
There's a huge fight scene with essentially two fights going on screen at the same time. Lorca's killed. Burnham beams onto the Discovery, back into the Discovery with Georgiou. They destroy the orb, the ship entirely, and go home, kind of. An end to the Mirror Universe arc, though we still have a Mirror Universe character in our midst.
I know, that's pretty cool.
Which is interesting because it kind of follows the kind of like we all thought we had finished the Klingon arc, but we had a Klingon in our midst, or at least two, and so this kind of carries on. Yeah, this did feel like a season finale. It really did, and I'm now wondering if the 2 episodes that they added were just kind of plucked onto the end of the season, or if they kind of rearranged the episodes, or if it really just was we had 13 episodes and then we wrote 2 more.
I think they wrote 2 more. I think they wanted to do something. I don't know the timeline of like when that happened, like when it was 13 episodes. Because remember, I kept thinking it's 13 episodes. So like when it was 13 episodes, and then like when all of a sudden it became 15 episodes. But it sounds like they were just like, oh, we got to do 2 more for whatever reason, and we're about to find out. That was a great episode summary. It was short and to the point, which I can never do, and so I'm really appreciative of it because that means we could talk.
I have notes, and I try to follow my. I follow my notes. I try to follow. It's because I write my notes in order as the events unfold on screen. Like, oh, I didn't like this. I like this. This is an Easter egg, whatever. And so yeah, I try to follow my notes when doing this. So.
I have a statement to make.
Well, here we go.
This episode was actually delightful on a number of levels for me personally, and I just feel like the sentiments of the episode kind of echo my real life sentiments. For me, I feel like this is actually begins for me. Like what is past is prologue as far as I'm concerned. Like now I'm really, really interested in Star Trek Discovery. Like I feel like, okay, like you know, I did it Star Trek. I did the marathon 13 episode jog, and you finally gave me like something to like ha ha ha. Which actually a lot to cling on to. But yeah, I mean, I guess we could jump right in.
Well, building off what you said, that doesn't have the same effect to me for me, because I kind of feel like we've been through this already 3 times. We had the double pilot episode, and then Discovery begins now that we're on the Discovery, and then we go to the Mirror Universe, and Discovery now it begins. We're in the Mirror Universe, and now what's past this prologue is that's kind of the end of all of that. And now we've gotten rid of our Mirror Universe captain, so it begins again. It's like kind of, you know, how many times can you restart a season before ending it?
You're not wrong there. I think you're absolutely right. But I guess what I'm saying for me personally, this is where the show feels like a Star Trek show. Like outside of, I still have my like major flaw, qualms with some of the continuity or expected continuity, as it were. But as far as like the I think the turning point for me was like, and now I know it's all intentional on the part. Like, okay, that's pretty awesome, good job. But like for me here, when the bridge crew kind of got together, when they had the senior staff meeting in engineering, and like the whole thing just became Star Trek, I was like, like, these are the tropes that I was looking for. Like, I don't know, it's just like that feeling. There have been other little like moments, but this is the time. This, for me personally, this episode had the most of that. Like the whole episode kind of will give me those feels, if you will, that I was expecting from a Star Trek show. Instead of like confusion, now I feel like I have clarity, and I think maybe that's also part of it.
Okay, fair enough. I will feel like I like Star Trek Discovery as a show. It doesn't feel that Star Trek. It feels Star Trek on some levels, but not on all levels. And it will feel entirely Star Trek on many levels. Not when there is one episode that is Star Trek, but when it's been Star Trek for a while, if that makes sense.
Right. That makes a whole lot of sense.
When I go back, like every time I go into Star Trek Discovery, especially since this chapter 2 has begun, I feel like, it's going to be a good episode. But it's like we're getting closer to what Star Trek is, and like even if this one to you feels a lot more Star Trek, maybe, I mean, it's going to take a while for me to think I'm jumping into Star Trek again, and I have that kind of mindset where it's discovery and exploration, and we might resolve a situation without blowing up an entire ship, which isn't really a Starfleet thing to do.
It isn't, but when you're forced to do it, it might as well look amazing, like it does.
I suppose.
But
so what did you want to talk about first? Do you have complaints? Do you have things that you enjoyed? Do you have
just to kind of like give a final little comment on that, because what you said was really interesting, and I think you're absolutely right. I think for me personally, it'll be interesting when Star Trek more consistently, if you credit this episode as the genesis of that feeling. That'll be a neat discussion to have in our future discussions.
For the record, I don't.
I think that the thing I liked about it is it did feel like a season finale or an ending, and clearly at some point it may have been that, because it does tie up pretty much that whole story that we were following about Lorca.
Yeah,
because Lorca's been a mysterious character, and I think like is doing something really interesting. I kind of now understand more completely why Michael Burnham, which is the central figure in this new show, this new Star Trek, and it's because we can have things like this, like now we already saw this story of this crazy event that occurred where a mirror our universe and saw the effects of that, and I think it wrapped up really nicely. And now we have with an interesting thing that's coming now with I forgot to turn off that darn thing that's coming now with Georgiou, now another mirror character in our universe, and it's going to be interesting to see what her effect is on the war. And they already hinted to some of that in the little teaser for the next episode. But I wonder how it's going to fit in, and I'm curious about it in a genuine way, is like, how are these characters going to fit in to the pantheon, or the bigger Star Trek story, like the larger story of the Federation and Starfleet and things like that. So that'll be to find out. But I really enjoyed the decision to make Saru captain, and I loved the way it was handled. And like, Saru is a character that I've had a lot of trouble with. Like, he's not a character that I've always been a fan of. I love Doug Jones, the actor; he's marvelous, but the character himself is someone who gave me great difficulty, because I wanted him to be, and I think I said this in a previous Starfleet Boys, that like more from him. Like, I wanted him to be like a better person. And the same goes for Burnham when you think about it. Like, she makes a lot of these decisions that you're like, you're not doing it right. It's like, from my safe all of Star Trek, that I've seen, and how I expect a Starfleet officer to behave, as we all do, and stuff like that. They're both very flawed characters, so you can see how there's like, there's a lot of trouble accepting them. And so here, when Saru finally takes command in that scene, I just was like, yeah, to me, it's like, Saru being captain isn't like the ideal situation, and that's like not, I don't think the show's trying to tell you he's ready to be the captain, or that he's like the best choice for captain. But what he actually does do is what I was hoping for the character, was to see him kind of grow into this person who, despite his feelings and his personal qualms, is doing something for the greater good of the ship and the crew and stuff like that. And it was that. So, and then again, that senior staff meeting scene in engineering was the most kind of like thing that I've seen happen. Like, it kind of like touched on a lot of sentiment from like, the original series and Next Generation, like that. We haven't had that room, or not the ready room, but like the conference room where like the senior staff gets together and stuff like that. And here it was set in engineering, and it was that like perfect kind of like, everyone giving their input to try to solve this problem, and it all came together very nicely with that speech that Saru gives. So I think that's what felt like the first kind of episode of Star Trek Discovery. And he says it's like, this is our maiden voyage. So in a sense, that's that's what they're saying, is like, now follow these characters until we kill them.
So I'm gonna try and build off what you said. My God, my memory is already failing me. I'm gonna try to remember pretty much what you went through there. But okay, so talking about
long-winded.
Talking about how it's interesting to have Burnham as the main character because she's not the captain. I think they sold it wrong by saying that we were going to follow. I mean, the way I think a lot of us interpreted it was we're going to follow the lower decks, and therefore we don't really know what's going on with the captain, etc., etc. So I was expecting to be in a situation where I saw the captain going into his conference room with the senior officers, but you wouldn't know what's going on in there, and you'd be kind of in the dark. And I was expecting that, but we didn't get that. We simply got like everyone. We know everything that's going on. It's just that our hero is Burnham. Therefore, we can make the captain a bad guy, etc., etc. And so I think I was just, maybe I misunderstood. Maybe they misexplained themselves. In any case, now that the confusion is over, and that I know what they're trying to, now that I know what they were trying to do, it works well. Yes, it gives us, I think it broadens possibilities. It gives you the opportunity to give us, evil captains, change up the captains every season if they wanted to do that, etc.
Ships, we know that ships other than the Enterprise, ships go through a lot of captains. Like you hear about it all the time. Like, it's like
there's a lot of ships, space is big, and there's a lot of people in Starfleet, so people really shift, people move. And I mean, you can expect that maybe your captain someday, I don't know, is expecting a child, so just quit Starfleet entirely. I mean, something as down to earth and as simple as that.
In the next season, Saru's gonna have a growth coming out of his stomach, because this is how Kelpians actually reproduce. And so at some point, no, I'm just kidding. Go on, sorry.
Better not be an egg, because then it's gonna be really close to the orville.
Good point.
Concerning Saru, I must admit I've had major issues with him for the past season. I had such high hopes for the character. Especially being Doug Jones, and especially them kind of explaining it as being the Spock or the Data, maybe even the 7 of 9 of this series. I thought, okay, well, this is interesting, but then they didn't go down that direction at all. And this emotional speech that he gave, I didn't feel it. I didn't feel it the first time when I was watching. But the first time, as I say, every time I watch it, the first time, it's on space, so we have ads, and the ads kind of cut up the episodes in a weird way, so sometimes things don't have the same effect. So when I rewatch the episodes, I tend to prefer them. I really have the structure and the editing and how they wanted it to be. The pacing is better, but I didn't feel the speech at all, especially when he starts it off by saying, like, I don't sense the coming of death this time, and it just annoys me because he never senses the coming of death at the right time. You've never got that right, boy. Come on.
So no, he got the. What about the Battle of the Binary Stars? Like, there is a lot of death that happens. Like, Takuma dies. Like,
but I mean,
dies. Like, that's the only other time we actually hear him say it. You know what I mean? Like,
you couldn't sense the coming of death when there's 24 Klingon warbirds in front of you. You couldn't have sensed that at all, right? No, it is a. I mean, it's not something that I think they used very well.
Someone put it like this on Twitter, and I'm so sorry, if you're actually somehow hearing this, and I don't know who you are. so
shout out to you.
Shout out to you, the person who said this on Twitter. But they said that really line to mean so much, but it does, whether you think it's a stupid line or not, like, you have to admit, like, it's kind of interesting or cool that, like, here Saru leverages the same, like, thing about his species as a strength, like, to give people strength, instead of in that other scene he seems to freak the fuck out of everyone. it's like he's like talking to Burnham, and she's already in a state of, like, agitation, right? And he's like, Burnham, I sense the coming of death. Like, imagine what that does to you. And, like, forget how cheesy the line is or whatever, but if Kelpians truly do have that ability, he's really hindering the situation. So here First of all, he probably does sense the coming of death. It's probably constant with him, you know, like as we've seen. But he does leverage this like ability of his to give confidence to the crew. Because how many times has Captain Kirk like said, "Oh yeah, we're definitely gonna make it out of this," but no, you know what I mean? Like, so that's what I liked about it.
Does he sense the coming of his death specifically? Does he sense the coming of the death of the people that he enjoys or that he considers his friends? Because I mean, he should be sensing the coming of death because everyone on the bloody Charon died. So
right.
I mean, I don't know. It's weird, but he feels in danger sometimes when Burnham's around. But is that just because he's frustrated at her? Because he never felt in danger when he saw Tyler Vok. Well, he saw it once when his transformation was being initiated. He kind of sensed it at that moment.
And we also get that we get that in this episode because when it's revealed that Lorca was from the Mirror Universe, when they're communicating with Burnham when she's in the Jeffries tube, he even like goes, "What? I would have sensed that," you know, like, so he's like confused. So I don't think
he's a bad Kelpian. I mean, maybe there are Kelpians that can sense stuff a lot better than him.
Right, and he's just not doing it right.
Let's bash on Deanna Troi here. She has the excuse of being half human, but
right.
she doesn't sense that much.
She senses it, you know, kind of. This is why I'm telling you, Saru's a great character because he's so flawed, and like I'm finding him to be I'm accepting him as a character that's really flawed.
It would be very interesting to one day meet another Kelpian. Like, Saru was the first Kelpian in Starfleet. Now we've got a second one, but this other guy he's like a genius. He senses everything correctly. He gets everything right. He's not scared because he's managed to overcome that in all his Starfleet training, and he just shames Saru. It would be very interesting to see that. It would give someone like Saru would be like, "Oh, I have to look up to him and try to be more like him."
I think that's who Saru's going to become. I really do. Like, I think that's what the plan, at least if I were the writer, that would be the plan for him. Because to make him, you know,
I truly hope he's not going to stay captain. I'm fine with him being acting captain, and I think it's a good step for his character because it shows us kind of this is part of his growth. This is part of his evolution as a Starfleet commander. And this is part of the kind of the road that he has to take, but I don't think he should stay captain. I think we need to put another captain on that bridge.
I'd be great with either outcome. I would be great if, like, in next season, Admiral Cornwall or however the scenario occurs, like for whatever reason, they're like, "Oh, Saru, nice, you got your crew out of the Mirror Universe, but you know, it would be an interesting new development for this character." But I also wouldn't mind if he captained the ship for the next season, because I think that would pose for an interesting new development in his relationship with Burnham. Because does he keep because he's kind of like done that to Burnham in the past, where he's like praising her, but then he, like, you know, as soon as there's a sign of danger, he's like, "Get off the ship," you know, like so.
Relationships are interesting. To show Burnham, Saru, etc., and having that new dynamic. Yes, it's interesting, but I think don't put aside your story just to show a certain dynamic. There's not enough payoff for me at this point to have Saru be a captain now. I want him. I don't feel like he's not necessarily deserved it. It's not the right word. It's just like I don't feel I don't know, accomplished in a certain way for him to be captain straight away. I would want him to go through a lot of struggle and pain and story before becoming captain, and then it would feel I would feel happier, and I would be kind of like I don't know, the emotion would be stronger if he were captain later on rather than now.
Do you admit, though, that like the circumstance here is kind of like there's really no other choice? Burnham is a specialist. She's not even a ranking member of, even though she has the experience, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. This was the right choice. This was the right choice.
Yeah.
He had to become acting captain here, and it was a good idea, and it's good for him as a character to become acting captain. It gives him an idea of what it is to be in command. And it also gives, I mean, not just in command, but in command, alone, because in the other instances he kind of like well, Lorca's going to come back, or we're going to save Lorca, or you kind of know that you're in command temporarily, where this is kind of a situation where he thinks, damn, I'm in command now, me.
Yeah,
there's no temporary else. I mean,
yeah, there's no one to rely on.
Sure, he's probably considering that, you know, once everything goes back to normal, maybe Starfleet are going to say, hey, you're going to have to step down. But in the immediate sense of the term, you're kind of thinking, no, this is me now, and I have to deal with it. That being said, I think the crew could have got back home without him.
Sure, because they're trained Starfleet. Because they're a conniving captain whose only mission is to get them back to his mirror universe so he could become the Emperor, you know? So I feel like I agree with you. Like Tilly could definitely...
Tilly and Stamets
done it. But like the point is that like I think the way Saru does handle it, in my mind, was right on point. Like I really agree with him as a captain. Let's see if he keeps that going. That's a great discussion. I like that we talked about that, because that was pretty cool.
This is the most we've talked about Saru. I'll give him that. We haven't talked about him very much until this point, just to say that we were kind of disinterested in him, and now we have discussions about him. And it really is because now the discussion is about how he's handling the captaincy rather than him being angry at Burnham, because that just wasn't interesting.
Let's hope he stays that way, but I don't think so. I think Burnham's gonna piss him off. What did you think of the phaser battles? For the most intricate we've seen in Star Trek as a series. I mean, we've seen it, you know, in the Kelvin universe. That's what it reminded me of, actually, is like this. They were on the level of the phaser fights and kind of battle sequences that we got in the Kelvin Star Trek, which like really brought it to a new level of action. And so as far as television is concerned, like I can't remember seeing something this intricate in a previous Star Trek series. Like DS9 comes the closest, I think, to like providing you with this kind of action on screen. And I loved every second. Like I had to watch the battle twice, actually, because I was like so happy with it.
I love action and stuff. I love every aspect of Star Trek, and I love how Star Trek can be everything. It's a bit of a shame that, for example, the Kelvin Timeline films are only based on action, but I suppose that's a series of films that's based on action. Maybe we could have a series of films that's more like thriller or investigation. We can try and do different things. I thought that gunfight, that firefight, was really well choreographed, and there was no music, which is probably the most interesting choice, but it was really good. Okay, fine. The sound effects sounded a bit too Star Wars-ish to me, or generic blaster kind of sounds. Like, I don't know. It sounded not very Star Trek, but then they overcompensated with all of the original series sounding bleeps and bloops that we had throughout the episode.
And everything.
The bridge sounds, the communication when Burnham's calling Saru. There's so many TOS sounds everywhere that I suppose I'm fine with the phases. Also, I can excuse it all by saying this is mirror universe. This is the genius of being in the mirror universe, isn't it? I can just excuse it by saying the phases, they're different. No blood in those fights, but just evaporating people.
We do get blood on the sword, which I always thought was funny, that in other Star Trek series, like when you stab someone, there's never blood like on the weapon.
Yeah, that annoys me so much. Whatever movie. The first time I really noticed it was when I saw Narnia, the first one. I know it's like a kids or preteen film or whatever, but I mean, at some point someone gets stabbed right through the body, and the sword comes out and it's clean. It's not even dirty. It's like chromed, and I'm like, why? Should be. I mean, at least stab him to the ground so that you don't have to show the blood, but you show that he's still stabbed or whatever. But I enjoy the fact that Discovery doesn't hesitate to show blood, guts, nudity, violence. I think that a television
Those
series.
Those are the updates that are really positive updates, I think.
That's the TV mature. But I think a show shouldn't go out of its way to do that. But I think a show should be allowed to do that if the story needs it to be that way.
We had a reason for it to be that way here. Did you love Michelle Yeoh's like crazy kicks where I can't where
she's like, god, yeah, she's like kick back and hit Lorca.
I know, it's like
how
so
the
awesome.
hell did you do that?
It's Michelle Yeoh. That's why I think only Michelle Yeoh.
So that's the second. So that's the second fight, which is less of a phaser fight, more of a. It's more of a gritty knife fight. Like so many people get stabbed in so many places. There's even a scene where Michelle Yeoh was just hacking at a guy. Lorca gets stabbed in the back, and he carries on his fight
brutal.
like a warrior.
It's really it's just like pretty.
The small complaint I had there was the music, because in that fight there was music.
There was music in that fight.
But I thought it dragged on a little too long. It had this dum 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 kind of thing. It just went on for a little too long. I don't know if they could maybe start the music later on and have it there for like not drag on, or cut the music out entirely and just have the grinding of bones or as they rip out the.
It would have. I think it would have been nice thematically if for some if they kind of followed that, like how the gun battle had no music, and then the second battle would have also not had music. I found something, to kind of like critique in some of the dialogue scenes. Like I thought that the use of handheld was that was the only thing. Like I was focused too much on the camera, like going like this, and I was like, oh wait, I gotta rewind and listen to what they were saying, because I was totally distracted by the technicality of I was like, what are they doing? Like, is it up and down bounces or right and left bounces or both? Like it was like, but that took me out of the moment only for a little bit. I would say that's. Although I know I like handheld shots like Battlestar Galactica, which is actually a series that I think I can say that like I've compared some of the design aspects. Like this show reminds me a lot of Battlestar Galactica, and also now that I think about it, like Battlestar Galactica really changed the landscape of fiction as presented. Like some would argue that show kind of created a new of science fiction, from everything from like showing realistic physics, in space battles, to the camera work, and there was a lot of steady cam and things like that in Battlestar.
Well, I haven't seen Battlestar Galactica, so I can't. I know, but I can vouch for The Expanse by saying that to me, The Expanse is probably the most accurate depiction of what space travel would be for humans in the near future. And yeah, the camera work has a lot to do with that, and it's just simple things like every time they don't go into warp drive, but they have their own kind of hyperspeed or whatever it is.
Right.
But so when they take off, or when they go into that kind of hyperspeed, they have to put like this thing in their mouth to bite down, and they've got this gel and what have you, and it's all a traumatic experience to jump to such speeds, and so they need to be like strapped down into their chairs and everything.
That reminds me, the warp drive thing. There's a lot of cool little reveals. Like I really liked seeing the warp core. How it's that's another thing that I have to give Discovery a lot of credit for, is like they went with the old-fashioned style warp core. I mean, it doesn't look like what you later see on the Enterprise. It looks more advanced than that, I think. So that's where I have like a qualm about it. But at the same time, it's also very accurate to that era, with those columns like going like this, and like and I loved in this episode when they were at warp and Saru's like standing in front of the warp core, and you see like the red, like electrical beams or whatever, and you hear the sound. It's like this sound. I don't know how to how to do.
I know what you're talking about.
That was a cool scene in this, and then I also liked all the sciencey stuff. I do like the way they resolved situation with the poisoning of the mycelial network. I really enjoyed the Sliders reference when we were in the in the mycelial network. Did you watch that show, Sliders?
I never watched that, so I didn't get that reference.
I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it since it aired, but they slide in and out of dimensions basically, which we now call the multiverse. I mean, like it's just a different name for the same concept, more or less, right? But that like tunnel thing through the multiverse that Stamets was seeing, that's a lot like how I remember they depicted it in Sliders, if I'm not mistaken. So it kind of
seems like the most logical and straightforward depiction of how you would travel the Mycelial Network or anything close
pretty
to
beautiful.
it. I am happy that they used the word multiverse in canon. It may seem ridiculous, but up until this point, we've always, like, Star Trek has pretty much established that there are an infinite amount of timelines going on at the same time, or parallel universes, however you want to call them, caused by quantum divergences and such and whatever. But it's nice to know that there is it's nice to know that there is a word or someone's out there saying it's a multiverse.
Yeah,
because it just makes it simple for every fandom out there. Every fandom has a multiverse.
It's true,
and
I think it's
good to see Star Trek has one now.
Any science fiction shows and even just like fantasy shows now incorporate this idea of multiple universes. Like it must be something that, like, yes, it is something that people are really fascinated about. There's another show coming out about like another, you know, two different crossover, I think it's called, or whatever. It's like a detective looking story, I don't know. And then of course the Flash deals with, you know, as well, and there's just a lot of it. I wonder what that means. Are we close to breaching the barrier of worlds before we even like travel to another solar system? Like, is that what humans are interested in?
It almost feels like it would be more plausible to find like a second Earth in another kind of reality or dimension rather than actually going to another solar system. It's too far away, isn't it? Whereas
the next is supposedly just sitting right on the.
It's here. It's just we can't really see it because we're not in it. We're in another one, but I mean,
fascinating.
Anyway,
I'm gonna enable the spore drive now, Sean, and we're gonna travel to Multiverse, Starfleet Boy here in a second and see what they're talking about over there. A totally non-related question to this episode, but I just had this thought and I was curious about your answer. So let's transport you, Sean, to the Star Trek future universe, and now you've gone through Starfleet, and you're ready to take your first commission on a ship. What ship would you? What era of Star Trek would you like to be in? First of all, that's the first question, right? The second question is, what ship would you like to serve on? And the Enterprise is totally fine. And what would you like your job on the Enterprise to be?
Oh God,
whatever ship, rather, not the Enterprise necessarily.
So is this pretty much in established shows that exist, or can I go into the future?
You can, you can only stay within the realm of what exists, but you can go into the movies too, because I know where you would love to be. Soon, hopefully, we'll all find out.
I think I would love to be I would love to be on Voyager, considering Voyager is my favorite show, and I get insulted by many people about this, but no, Voyager is my favorite show, and I would love to be on Voyager.
And what would be your job on Voyager?
I've always been fascinated by astrometrics. So now it seems stupid to say this because Discovery is all about holographic technology and how it works and what have you. But I really loved astrometrics in Voyager because it really gave you like a sense of wrapping your head around how big the galaxy is, and it gave you a sense of everything is three-dimensional. It's not just ships kind of like this. We have a comet here, and the ship is here, and we have to plot a course, you know, doing this and what have you. I really love that.
That's cool. I would
be 7 of 9's assistant. on the USS Voyager.
Very nice. I like that.
I will say one thing though. I don't want to be lost in space far from my wife, so I'd have to drag my wife with me to be lost in space with me on the ship. As horrible as that sounds, but
I think she'll find that rather romantic.
Oh really? Yeah. The Kazon and the Borg and everyone. That's very romantic.
Think about what Keiko had to go through. Although
she is the most supporting wife that exists, because
I think
Deep Space Nine seems like a horrible place to live.
It's so true. I think she's also the only wife that we've ever like seen, or like a spousal relationship on Star Trek. She was like, they were the first spouses, like, you know, where we saw like a married couple and their interactions, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Rewatching TNG and Deep Space Nine in order of release, so one episode TNG, one episode Deep Space Nine, etc., is very interesting, because you see how gradually Miles O'Brien becomes more and more important, and then you see how Keiko becomes more and more important, and then it gets to that point where they get married, and you know, they transfer to Deep Space Nine, and it's all great. Well, there's the baby, of course.
Molly.
It is one of those lasting storylines that is
sending.
It's down to earth.
It's pretty cool. Yeah, it's pretty neat. I like that you're watching it that way too, which is pretty cool. You're kind of seeing it, which is really neat. That's a great idea. This episode, what did you think of the revelation of kind of like how the bridge dynamic moving forward as a Captain Saru ship? Like I didn't think of that I felt great. Now think about it. For me, that was like an interesting thing, because I noticed a tonal shift in the way that the story was told. Again, going back to a classic way of telling the Star Trek story, as opposed to up until now, like especially like okay, I'm gonna be so bad at the names, but Ariam. Is it Ariam?
Ariam.
This is a character that we've seen.
You mention it. Yeah. You're right. I see where you're going with this.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying?
I see where you're going with this, because up until now, we've had Stamets, which is not a bridge crew officer. We've had even Landry in the first episodes, which clearly was not. We've had Mira Lorca, and now we got a bit more of what's his name, Price on the bridge, Ariam on the bridge, Saru, and we're gonna have that dynamic with, of course, missing Tyler, but Tyler wasn't really bridge crew before, because we all knew he was something else.
Yeah. But Detmer and
yeah, no, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah, and I'm gonna call her Joanne because I can't pronounce Oesic. I don't know how it's Saru pronounces it, but I don't know. It's like so but it was cool because they've been there all along in the background, and I had a complaint. I was like, why aren't we spending any time with these characters? You know what I mean? Like I was like,
but they're not main cast, are they? That's the thing. When you look at the names, you have the names of the people that we were just mentioning.
Right, but they've been along for the ride, like, you know, this whole time. Although the communications officer is different now. It's Bryce, who's played by Ronnie Rowe. I'm on IMDb now, but
Bryce. I thought it was Price.
Oh, Bryce. I heard you say Bryce, so I didn't even know you said it wrong.
Yeah, there you go.
But yeah, like
I pay no attention to the bridge crew.
They're both so I think that, you know, what you can account for that with a night shift and a day shift too. So it's kind of an interesting thing to see this kind of like
you and your night shift.
What's that? I love the night shift. That's so. Just to answer my own question from earlier,
what's the best thing of Star Trek? The night shift.
To answer my question from earlier, I would want to serve aboard the USS Enterprise A during the film eras with the red, you know, with the red uniforms, the very military like uniforms.
Be like captain of the night shift.
And I want to be captain of the night shift. Yes, that's totally what I want to be. Like totally. There you go.
Okay, why not?
Lieutenant commander though in rank, so I'd be like commander of the night shift. There can be only one captain. So yeah, I really liked the bridge crew introduction in a way, which occurred in this episode. Not introduction, but like kind of them or they're unbound now, or revealed.
To show more of them, but I don't know if we're going to go into that in that direction. I know that so I sent Culber, which I wasn't expecting.
Wait, what about Culber? That he's actually dead? Wait, did you say that you were surprised that Culber's actually dead?
Yeah. I was truly convinced they were going to bring him back, but I suppose they just wanted to. They were talking about how they were going to bring him back, kind of as a ghost in the Mycelial plane network, sharing his wisdom or whatever. So yeah,
but it kind of was it you in the last Starfleet Boy that said that you thought that the Mycelial Network's going to be like, or maybe that was Nick, or I can't remember, but like it kind of lends to this, like the idea that the Mycelial Network is somehow sentient or has its own kind of, like, it is a life form in and of itself, and it can absorb like things like, Culber's soul, if you will. Whatever. So I don't know. It's interesting, and I think it's interesting.
They kind of shut that down though, with how they simply said that it was the big fire orb that was infecting the mycelial network, and I think the idea is just it can be infected simply because it is to some level biological, but it isn't sentient in any way. I will say this though: we are,
I don't know,
9 months in the future as it stands. Or at least 9 months after they left the prime timeline. And there still is the possibility that they go back, and they go back to a time where Culber is alive, where they can like save Culber or something. Maybe that's a possibility.
Well, and certainly there's still room for the idea that we travel back to the beginning of the, because like the war is now getting bigger and bigger, and like, again, it doesn't really reconcile with what's known, or
the war has gotten to a point where it completely disregards canon, and I think to some certain extent all of the story has, because the mirror universe, we're not supposed to know about it at this point. Even cloaking devices all across the Empire wasn't supposed to exist. It was all plausible and explainable if it was just the sarcophagus ship that had the cloaking device, if it was just a small skirmish with the Klingons. Now everything is so big and blown out of proportion that it feels like they're going to have to pull something, a stunt like going back into the past and then saying, well, none of this really happened.
Well, and if they had gone back to where the point where they actually left, they would have had the data from all those jumps to find, to uncover the cloaks, and the war might have gone in a different direction. So it does show how important the Discovery was, and like taking it out of the fight for 9 months, and like what has happened. So there is definitely like a correction that has to be made of some kind, and I think the crew of the Discovery might feel responsible for this. At least Stamets might, for in some way. I don't know.
It's interesting because I really don't know what direction they're going to go for the next episodes. I mean, seeing the teasers and the kind of snippet for next episode, I kind of understand that everyone on the Discovery is going to be under arrest. Or they're going to go through questioning or something, because spoilers, but Sarek and Cornwell beam onto the bridge and take control of the ship. Probably because I'm assuming the ISS Discovery has been
has joined doing probably, like, it would make more sense,
something like that, or wreaking havoc, at least. But yeah, I don't know where they're going to go with the next episodes.
So you think the ISS Discovery is going to definitely? You don't think when they somehow it threw them back into like the Discovery didn't somehow like throw the ISS Discovery back into Mirror Universe, right?
At this point, I have absolutely no understanding of how any of the exchanges or flips or whatever's that were made. Both the Mycelial Network and the going from one universe to another at this point baffle me, and I think I'm going to have to wait until the end of the season to really have an idea like of the timeline of the events, if it were to change again, how many universes were involved if it were to change again, and really try to wrap my head around it. At this point, I'm just too confused.
Yeah,
it's just because I was convinced that we were going to see the other Lorca somewhere, but now I get a feeling that he swapped places with Mirror Lorca, and therefore was killed on the Baran with all of the others.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
With the Mirror crew. That makes sense, but then I didn't think of that until the explanation was specifically given by Lorca about the events.
Which that was a great scene, by the way. I really enjoyed seeing the Baran. I have to say, like, Gary did a video reaction to and he said that like for some reason the Discovery is growing on him, whereas he still won't buy the model for it. But I feel very similarly in that like I'm not really fond of the design of the Discovery, but in this episode I did like the hero shots, if you will, when it's attacking the mycelial ball.
Ball. The orb.
Ball. Or I should say the mycelial orb. Oh my goodness. PG-13. That was for you, bro, Perkins.
You leave our mycelial balls alone. Is that what you want to take the show? Is that the direction in which you want to take the show?
Maybe just this once. Anyways, the hero shot
two of us, and we'll make you miss this, but
I mean, honestly, the engine's revving, like the whole 9 yards. That whole scene was like really well done, and I also liked the scene where the Emperor's ship is attacking the Baran. I wish we had seen the Defiant just for, you know, but like I get that it's not important to have seen it. Like I don't disagree with
this episode pulled a last Jedi on us, didn't it? Where every single fan theory that we had was simply shut down right off the bat. Like, we're not going to see the USS Defiant. I was expecting to see like a disfigured Captain Lorca, but that didn't really happen. He just fell into the again the orb. I don't know. Everything that I was expecting from this just kind of. I had so many theories about Mirror Stamets and what he was going to do and the impact of Mycelial Network, and all of it just came to a hard close. And they blew it up and went home. And now we have another problem, but they closed all of this chapter?
Yeah, I think so.
Paragraph? Yeah, no, they really did pull a Last Jedi in that sense. We had so many things going on in our mind, and nothing was... I am disappointed that we didn't see the USS Defiant. But then kind of relieved, because then they couldn't destroy it.
Right.
In the sense that, like, Discovery has a tendency of changing things, let's be honest. And though it was slightly changed in that display, I got a sense that maybe they would have gone too far in showing it.
But it does give us a hint
on screen.
You know, if there is to be a cameo by the USS Enterprise, it does give us a hint as to what the Enterprise might look like when we see it.
I don't think so. I would like to assume that the USS Defiant looked like that because it had been present for at least 100 years in the Mirror Universe, and
you're saying
they made changes to it.
It's a refit, of course. Yeah, that makes sense. That's a good point.
Yes, it was 100 years advanced, like technology-wise, once it got there. But this is the mirror universe, and they want to make things like dangerous and what have you, and equip more weapons and more defensive capabilities. And maybe they wanted to, because the pylons were kind of cut down in a way, and so it makes it sleeker.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually.
100 years is a long time.
Yeah, why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah,
like
without necessarily changing like the technology in it, because you wouldn't necessarily want to touch that's more advanced. But anyway, yeah, no, visually it makes sense to me to have that one changed. If they do come across the USS Enterprise one day,
which has already been mentioned on the show,
yeah, which at this point is with Pike, not with Kirk, and a digitally remastered Spock, I would assume. Well, Pike as well. I would like to see that ship kind of as it is, like as it was in the original series with the cage.
Just with like better lighting, of course.
So here's the thing about the USS Discovery itself. I don't like the design of the ship. I think it's hideous. I think the pylons are too long. I don't like the way the bridge kind of sits on top of it like a weird funky mushroom. But I like the way they show it on screen. I think that they've textured it in a realistic but very simple way, which kind of it gives us a modern feel, but does feel very original series. Yeah, the nacelles aren't right and whatever. Okay, but just the way they show it on screen feels very original series, and I think following that design aesthetic or the way that kind of visual representation, I think they could show us an original series looking Enterprise.
I do too. I think so. Yeah.
Without
more
any
and more
problem whatsoever.
I'm starting to realize that my personal qualms with the designs like are just a kind of a exercise in futility. As far as like there is no way to reconcile, like you can't really like two looks. One show was made in the 60s and the other show's being made in 2017 2018, and even just like inspired technology today. So Discovery has a job to inspire the technology of tomorrow, and I think like it makes sense to have like the
I disagree. I think that a Star Trek no, I'm sorry. I think a show that takes place after the events of Nemesis and the destruction of Romulus, so a show that's in the future, that has a duty to show kind of an obligation to show us what the future will be and what it will be like. Whereas Discovery has kind of being set in the past of what we've already seen, needs to respect what's already been established, and it needs to, I mean, Rogue One respects Star Wars, the original. Discovery should respect the original series. And I know, I'm annoying because
no, I don't think so. Like I actually,
it's very hard to reconcile the two looks, but there is a way to visually represent what once existed on the original series without necessarily rebuilding the original series.
Right. I mean, for whatever reason, the show was, and that's yet to be revealed. Like, I think at the end of Star Trek Discovery, we're all going to be like, makes sense why they set it in this time period. But at this moment, right now, I still don't see like why it needs to be set in this time period. Like, there's no real good reason that's been presented to me yet that tells me like, oh yeah, this has to be, at the end of the day, it's not important that Burnham is Spock's sister or that, Sarek raised her. Like, that really has no bearing on her as a character or anything else. I like Burnham despite that. You know what I mean? I actually don't even think about it often when I'm watching the show until Sarek pops up or,
So here's my question. These past 4 episodes have been kind of in their own, they've had their own arc. among this new season of this new series. They've been in the Mirror Universe, and I think these are probably the 4 strongest episodes we've had, or at least the 4 strongest consecutive episodes we've had of Discovery. And that's because we did move away from, I think, elements that annoyed us, like certain inconsistencies technology-wise. We moved away from the Klingons being completely different. And we also moved away from what is now explained, but a pretty terrible Starfleet captain.
Right.
But I mean, that makes sense now. But do you think that these 2 last episodes will it go back to the kind of iffy Star Trek Discovery that we had in the beginning? Or now have they perfected their show, and even if they go back to technically where we were before, will they get it right?
I think that they're getting closer to being right, and I think that the thing is that after this episode I can pretty much forgive a lot of these things, because I see that what you're saying, I see the show evolving into something, and I'm hoping it could evolve into something that I totally hate, but so far it is evolving into something that I like more and more. So I do feel like, yeah, like finding it hard pressed to not follow Star Trek Discovery, because I'm genuinely curious about the story. I like a lot of the a lot of the conflicts in the characters, and so that's pretty much what's carrying me on the show, despite my other qualms.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. What about that green spore, Sean?
Oh. So that'll be dealt with in season 2, for those that are wondering. They said that on After Trek, but there is a green spore that kind of flies away from the other spores that have kind of taken over engineering.
I think the Mycelial Network heard you about all the blue, and was
I was so happy. It's like, oh my god, this thing is green.
We're traveling through the network, it turned red for a second too, which is really
so many colors. More than just blue. Wow.
Someone at Star Trek CBS was like, that guy Sean's really upset about all blue. Like we need to do something
about blue. I mean, damn it,
But sorry, go
on. Maybe even Twitter's gonna change up and become black or something. Just poor guy. No, I really don't know where they're gonna go with that. And that I think it's simply because I don't know what to make of the Mycelial Network. I don't know how to.
That's what I'm saying is the fact that it's both biological and also a thing. It kind of reminds me of the wormhole in because the wormhole itself is like a function of space, right? Like it's just a phenomenon that happens. It takes you from one point to another really quickly, but inside the wormhole we find out that there are actually, what's that?
If it's stable.
Oh yeah, if it's stable. But we also find out that inside that particular wormhole, there's a sentient living inside what they call them, the wormhole aliens, or as the Bajorans call them, the celestial prophets, right? So where I see the Mycelial Network paralleling at this point, I mean, it could go in who knows what direction it's going to go into, but at this point I kind of see it paralleling that, like it travel through. So there's that component of it, but then there's the spores, and the spores are from biological, and there's other creatures that utilize this network, like for example the tardigrade, and it certainly is sentient, if not rudimentary, in that a tardigrade, all it does is eats all day, but so it's like whatever. But yeah, I just kind of think that little green, that was very Star Trek, is to throw that like hint.
What would be very Star Trek also is to never come back and never talk about it ever again.
Right, you're right. That would be very.
Remember that thing in season 1? It's like 7 seasons down the line.
That's true. Good point.
Yeah, but they did say they're going to address that in season 2. Could it be that there are sentient life forms in the Mycelial Network, and that is kind of a way to communicate? Could it be? Don't know.
We'll have to find out.
Tilly is important. That's all we get from it.
Yeah, and she is going to become captain someday. I have a lot of, especially now that she's had a taste of it as Captain Killy. I'm sure she's going to work even harder to.
And so that's where there's a huge difference between Tilly and Saru. Is the day Tilly becomes captain, goddamn, all of us are going to cry. Because it's going to be very emotional and amazing, and the journey she went through to get there is going to be just it's going to be a struggle, and it's going to be such a heartwarming story, and that's what makes it so gratifying to finally have her as a captain. And that's what I think they should have done with Saru, and where they messed up, where they just, if they have him stay captain now.
I think that, like, I agree that I definitely have more attachment to the character of Tilly, but that's because, yeah, I mean, I feel like in many ways Tilly echoes my own character, you know, and I think, you know, again, I think we've always said that she and Stamets have felt the most Starfleet, you know, of all these characters. I think that, like, whatever the end game of you know, which, you know, maybe many seasons from now, whatever the end game is like, I feel like they're definitely gonna all become captains. Like, somehow they're just gonna, like, it's gonna, Burnham's gonna become a captain, Saru's gonna become a captain, and Tilly's definitely gonna be a captain.
That could be one of the most interesting ways to end a Star Trek series, is rather than have like a kind of, because all of our endings have pretty much been like they all go on and carry out their lives. You know, we just saw like a slice of their life as a crew, and this could be very different because this is how they all got to be captains. And then so in that last season, they all go off in their own direction, becoming captains of their own ship. And this is kind of, it would be a story about kind of the birth of many of the fleet's captains.
Yeah, I like that.
But then I don't think they've really, I don't think they've really thought about like the end game of the entire series.
They may not have. I mean, like, I don't know how to. You know, this is the part of like writing a show that I imagine
might not want to.
You might
not want to close yourself so quickly.
Shows that seem to have like a end game in mind, like just because of the nature that it's based on a series of books. Game of Thrones has that. You have that understanding that, like, there's a set place. Although now, interestingly enough, there's no more books for Game of Thrones, but the TV show is still going on. So now the show will inform the next book, I guess. I don't know. It's an interesting thing, but Star Trek's not bound by that. So I don't think that well, if they do have a plan for the show, they can certainly change it if something better comes along, which is how I imagine the show is going to be. But yeah, one wonders, it's a good question for the writers of Star Trek The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and well, mainly those 3 series, because and Enterprise, sorry, but poor Enterprise didn't get a full run. But I wonder, you know, if the writers of those shows, the writing teams of those shows, had like a goalpost, like an end place where they wanted to take the show. Because with Next Generation, whether it was on purpose or just it happened that way, you do have the nice little bookend with Q, you know, and like Q's like integral in the first episode and the last episode, you know, and so who knows?
Well, from what I understand, TNG was, the way they wrote it, being episodic, they had no arc that they wanted to follow. They just thought that it made sense to bring back Q for the last one. Deep Space Nine, but it works out very well. Deep Space Nine, since all of the producers and everyone important was kind of so focused on Voyager, everyone working on Deep Space Nine, they were able to go in a direction which was very much more serialized and have all the Dominion War, etc. And they did that because no one was, you know, kind of watching them. And so it only made sense that the final chapter what's officially called the final chapter of Deep Space Nine only then makes sense. You know, it makes sense if they showed that story. Voyager, they had an endgame straight away. Lol, because I think the final episode is called Endgame. But
the ship has to get home.
The ship has to get home. That's what you want. And I think if you had like, we have 70 years to get home, and then you do a show for 7 years, and they've still got 63 years to get home, it's kind of like, what? Modern television, the way we see shows like, for example, Vikings deal with the passing of time, I think if Voyager would have come out nowadays, they maybe would have gone in a direction where they literally showed us 70 years go by, and the characters age, and children grow up on the ship, and the ship become different, and it would be a very different show in the sense that once they get home, you would no longer have a Starfleet crew upholding Starfleet regulations. You would have a
colony at best.
A colony that, yes, kind of respects Starfleet's wishes and the Federation's wishes because they were brought up lines, but they wouldn't necessarily be enlisted.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it would have been a very different show had it come out nowadays. Enterprise, God knows what they wanted to do with the end of it because they got cancelled. Poor guys. But yeah, I think maybe, I don't know. I don't think they have an idea of what the end game is going to be for Discovery at this point. They're just probably happy to know that they're going to go into a season 2 and doing their best to write a second season.
And I certainly can say that I'm happy to spend that money. I'm going to give you more money, Discovery. You got me. Do you have any more notes?
I'll tell you what, I have personal beef against the marketing Star Trek Discovery because being in Canada, I cannot watch any of the promotional content coming out on CBS. That's region blocked to the USA. And I also can't watch any of the promotional content coming out on Netflix because that's region blocked to, well, the world except Canada. which means that being Canadian and being in Canada and watching Star Trek Discovery is kind of unfair. So if anyone hears this,
I have to say that I used to say that it was unfair being American and watching Star Trek Discovery because we have to pay like $10 a month to watch a show. But yeah, you have the shittier experience in Canada, so I'm going to shift my show's mission to get CBS to focus on a better experience for Canada first, and then you can focus on a better experience for the States.
Well, I mean, I watch it on TV, but it's not as if I'm not paying for the service because I have to pay for space the channel, right. And it's about $7 a month anyway.
But you don't even have a choice to have no commercials, which is not fair. At least I have the choice to have no commercials. And on that note, a little beef with CBS. Now I'm seeing ads when I log into CBS, and I pay the maximum price for no ads, and I'm seeing ads not on the show, but just the website. And CBS, I do not appreciate it. I do not appreciate that, and I will be writing your
time
to your comments line, and I'll sign it Starfleet Boy. And you'll know.
As we have said time and time before, Star Trek needs a website with a video on demand platform for only Star Trek shows, and you can bombard us with all of the ads you want, which is merchandise for Star Trek. That's fine. But it needs to be anyway. About the episode, do I have anything else to say? All I will say is that it is not my favorite episode of Discovery, and it is not in my highest ranking episodes of Star Trek of all time, like many people have been saying. I get this general vibe on the internet that this is, for everyone, the most amazing thing Discovery has done. And I don't agree with that.
I think it goes back to your comment, like when we were talking about Lethe, it's like, well, so far the show's been so frustrating that when you get something that's like in line with your your core expectations of what Star Trek is like, you're just like, it's like an overreaction almost, because you're like, what is this show capable of? And so I think I understand that reaction because I had it in this episode for sure. You were the one that made that comment.
Well, there you go. Yeah, no, absolutely. But I didn't get that here. I didn't get that here. I think that
can't win them all.
Yeah, no, it was a good episode. There's no denying that. I think the directing was very interesting. I think that the acting was great. I loved the way Lorca was in this episode. Like I don't like poetry. Shoot him. All of that kind of stuff. That was really great. And I like the fact that it wrapped up so much story in an unexpected way. Because as much as fun as it is to theorycraft, it's nice to see that they don't always go to the obvious and like, no, we're going to shut all of this down now. And yeah, it was cool.
It was very pleasant. Speaking of theory crafting, I guess before we give our ratings, and also I don't know if you've finished going through your notes yet, but I have a question. Just what you think personally. Future, like, is it the end of this character? I mean, Jason Isaacs has given us some nice little conflicting teases on Twitter, but but what do you think personally? Like, do you feel like this is the end of the character, or do you want to see more Lorca?
I think this is the end of okay. No, I think this is the end of Lorca. I think the way Jason Isaacs talked about it on After Trek, and I think the way the story wraps up, it's a nice way to end it. It's just, this is it. Like, Lorca was a terrible man from the mirror universe. He came over, abused our universe, to try and take control of his, and died death. And I think that's it. We shouldn't. I think that's enough.
Something though, that I thought of, which is if Culber can end up in the mycelial, his consciousness can be cohesive in the mycelial network somehow, then maybe Lorca's consciousness could also be.
So it's the graveyard. That now every consciousness could use cameo every actor ever that's ever been in Star Trek now. Is that what you're saying? It's well, like
isn't that what the Nexus was for Captain Kirk? You know what actually would have been, I just thought of this. I'm going to share something that it's going to sound really stupid. I'm giving you an advance warning, right? Okay. What if, advance warning. What if the explosion of the mycelial actually creates the Nexus? And that's what the Nexus is. Like, it's this thing that travels through the galaxy, orbiting around the galaxy. That's a remnant of this explosion of the mycelial.
I'll have to check that out, because this is the Nexus. Essentially crosses the galaxy. What is it? Every 39.1 years?
No, wasn't it 70 something years? So it had to have been. That's fast. If I can.
Yeah, I've been looking up on the Nexus recently, but
are you gonna do a Nexus episode of Trek on the Tube? That would be pretty cool.
It would be an interesting way to explain something, because the Nexus is very peculiar. It's not necessarily another dimension or another universe. It's just kind of like a thing,
pocket universe or something like that. Yeah, it's like,
it's just like it is a wormhole. In a way, it's a ribbon technically, but
an energy ribbon.
So there we go. So 39.1 years. It crosses the galaxy every 39.1 years. And so we know for a fact that it went through in 2293, 2332, 2371.
Oh. So if it was created, what you have to do is line up the. I don't think the writers were even thinking about the Nexus when they wrote the Mycelial Network. It's just something I came up with.
If you were to take if you were to take 39 years off 2293, it would be 2254. That's close. Okay, fair enough. It's close. But this is taking place in 2256. So.
But
come on,
Data, take into account Data, take gravimetric anomalies into consideration. Was the Nexus ever delayed in its travels? Yes, Captain. In 24 seconds. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry. It's close. It's close. Anyways, and I want to live in the Nexus for sure. If I had to choose a death, it would be death by Nexus. That would definitely be.
It's a rebirth, isn't it? Though
it's
I'd be making. I try again.
So, I guess do we go to theory crafting for what's to come at all, or do we just go with our ratings?
Well, I mean, we've already theory crafted a bit, but if you have something special to propose.
No, I am very curious to see this next episode because it's really going to set what we're going to have next season. So I think this next episode and the one after that is going to, I mean, I'd be very surprised if they wrap up the whole Klingon affair. Surprised if they did and we start fresh in season 2, but who knows?
Yeah, for these 2 last episodes, I think it's just going to be kind of like we need to win the war situation, and from what I gather, they're going to be using the Emperor's tactical skills to help them.
Sure. Her methods, who knows? But they are pretty desperate. It sounds
maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe they're going to put Georgiou as captain of the USS Discovery, and it's like, hey, how do you feel about a life of exploration and discovery? Ooh.
Right, like I mean, she was the Empress of,
and then she hangs her sword. She hangs her sword up next to the telescope of the other Georgiou.
I do think it's interesting that now they have to unfabricate all the stuff and revert the Discovery back to her regular self. So that's something. I'm sure the night shift will take care of it.
Yeah.
I'm going to give this episode an interesting rating. So bear with me here. It gets a tentative 10. I'm going to wait for the whole season to be finished to decide whether this is a 10 episode. But I feel like this is the best episode of Star Trek Discovery so far. There's 2 episodes left, so I can't know for sure. Yeah, so far.
Okay, I'm going to try and understand the way your mind works. Is it just because? Is it just because it's the best episode of Discovery so far that it gets a 10, or could the best episode of Discovery get a 9?
I think that
if it is the best, it has to have a 10.
Yeah,
does it make sense for you that way?
That's what it feels like to me. So far, this is a 10er. Yeah. But it's tentative because I don't see when I do my ratings on Star Trek: The Next Generation. I have a little when we do our discussions of TNG or DS9,
where it's going
and the other shows. So it's kind of like a safe way to do it. But I guess my gut feeling is this is my favorite episode. But I don't know because the next 2 episodes of the season might end up being my favorite episode of this season. So, or I guess I could just say that as far as an episode with storytelling and things like that go. Didn't have more than 110, so I take that back. This is a 10 episode as far as I'm concerned. It gave me everything I wanted. It gave me a lot more surprises than I expected, and it gave me a pretty nice resolve to a lot of qualms and questions and things like that that I've had up until this point. Is it the best episode of Star Trek Discovery so far? Yes. So there we go.
Wow. So do I give this a terrible rating just to balance it out? Or do I give it my actual rating?
That's why Gary wants you to go first. Now I know.
No, I'm not that kind of person. I will give you my rating. I give it a 7.
Very cool.
Because it's a good episode, but it's not the greatest of Discovery, and it's not the greatest. It has flaws. It has flaws like the bioweapon. He goes to Lorca goes to save Stamets, and they have this discussion about a bioweapon, and then he says, "Now I don't need you anymore," and kills him. So, what about that bioweapon? Why did they not use that in the episode?
A weapon like that. At first, if I recall correctly from the episode, he wants to kill Stamets. He's upset at him for whatever reason. And Landry also seems to hate him don't know if we really understand how bad Stamets
she seems
was.
To just generally hate people, but
in this iteration, yeah, prime universe, she's kind of like
same thing.
You know, Landry's the same in both universes. But anyways, he was gonna let Landry kill him after the bioweapon apparently knocked out most of Georgiou's troops, but it didn't really work in terms of its effect that he was having, hoping to have or whatever. And so Stamets' life is on the line, but then Stamets is crucial to lower the energy field in the battle. Remember, he's like Stamets here, and he's like on his iPad, like doing something to lower the integrity of the shield, which means I love just like how she, like, the Empress just had all these contingency plans, like she was ready for whatever, and she does the emergency beam out. And so it isn't until, I think Lorca always did intend to kill Stamets, but he needed him to get to the throne room because he was the technical, he's basically the best IT guy. He like needed him to get that far on a technical level, to like traps or whatever. And when he manages to do that function, and Lorca now has command of the Charon, he no longer needs him. So that's what I got out of it.
Okay.
Does it bring the rating a little higher?
No, it doesn't. My rating stays at 7. I just had a thought, but you talking about him being like the best or the only IT guy there, it just brought up I thought, like, generally speaking in Discovery, it kind of feels like everyone has kind of no defined post. They're all just security officers or soldiers, and then you have this guy's a science officer, this guy's an engineer, this guy's whatever, but all of the others are just kind of, they're all security people, and they're all, especially on the USS Charon,
right,
the Empress ship, it kind of felt like everyone was just there because they were soldiers.
Right.
And then Stamets is the only guy that actually has a Starfleet relevant job.
And like, and it kind of fits though, like most most like kind of totalitarian regimes like that do have a disproportionate amount of soldiers versus scientists. It's like I think, again, I seem to remember a lot of things you say, but so I actually listened to you, Sean. But I think you said this. You were like, it would be nice to see Klingons that are also scientists, which we do get to see in TNG, for example, a little bit, I think. But that's something we never really see.
Enterprise, we get a doctor, Klingon.
Yeah, we get a doctor and stuff like that. So it is cool to see that. And again, like, that's another nice thing about this episode, is that like you did feel, again, with this bridge crew kind of coming together or being a little bit more of the highlight, like I felt like for the first time I felt like the ship a bit too, in the sense that like, oh, I'm starting to understand what everyone's role is, and like how they contribute to the more Starfleet like life rather than a more militaristic one. So it's kind of a neat little preview of like Discovery being an actual science vessel. Very cool. What else is on your list that I could argue with you about?
Nothing. I give it a 7. You give it a 10.
So that brings it to like what, an 8.5. You feel like that's fair as a group rating? Cool. I really enjoyed our discussion today. I miss the crew, the summit. What do we call it? The Council of Elders, or like, or what have you. And we'll certainly have more of that. But it was enjoyable to do this one-on-one with you today. So thank you so much.
The Starfleet Summit, is it?
Starfleet Summit, Starfleet Voice Summit. Anyways, thank you, audience, for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed our discussion today. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I did it.
Wow.
All right.
Oh my God.
I totally did. I remembered. And don't forget to visit Trek on the Tube, The Real Ketwalski, and Ketwalski, the Trek Book Club, and Trekker Prize. Go to all of those places. The Doctor doesn't have I think he has a Tumblr, actually. So if you look for verticaldreams.tumblr.com.
I'm the only channel that has cookies.
You have cookies?
So I'm the only channel that actually sends out cookies. So I mean, might as well subscribe to me. No, I'm just kidding.
You do have Easter eggs. I know that.
I do have Easter eggs. You can't eat them, but
when's your video going up?
Well, it's been delayed by a certain podcast. I try to get my videos up on Thursdays, but sometimes
that's right, you do.
Because, for example, yesterday we spent the entire day out doing horrible kind of paper-related things. We're preparing our documents for Canadian immigration, etc., etc. My video is delayed, so it might be out Friday this week.
Well, you heard it here first. For those of you that are cross-channel audience members,
exclusive
Trek on the Tube news on Starfleet Boy.
I always try to keep people updated on Twitter, though. I always send out like I'm going to get this out, in due time or not, whatever.
It's very helpful, actually. I do appreciate it. I am subscribed, and I also hit the alarm button on your channel, so I get the emails, and I know, but subconsciously, wow. I think all the days blend in, so I never really truly know what day. I just know it's a feeling. I'm like, oh yeah, there's gonna be a Trek on the Tube video out today. And on that note, live long and prosper, and we'll see you next time.